When my daughter Samantha died at 36, I thought that was the worst thing life could do to me. I was wrong. The worst came 3 days later, at her funeral, when a man I hadn't seen in 11 years walked through the church doors wearing a $1,000 suit and crocodile tears and told me he'd come to collect what was his. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Douglas Morrow. I'm 66 years old, and I spent the last 5 months of my daughter's life watching pancreatic cancer eat her alive. She was everything to me. Her mother, my wife Jean, died in a car accident when Samantha was 10. I raised that girl by myself. Worked double shifts at the post office, then drove an Uber on weekends so she could go to a decent school. And she made every sacrifice worth it. By 30, Samantha had built a chain of organic skincare boutiques across the Southeast Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, Savannah. She called the brand Glow and Root, and it was pulling in millions. On February 8, 2024, my daughter called me into her room at Emory University Hospital. She could barely sit up, but her eyes were sharp, sharper than mine. "Dad," she said, "I need you to listen carefully. I've arranged everything." She pointed to a manila envelope on her bedside table. "Take that home tonight and read every page." That evening, sitting at my kitchen table with my hands shaking, I opened the envelope and found her will, drafted with our family attorney, Nathan Pierce. Samantha had accumulated $26 million through her stores, licensing deals, and real estate investments. She left every cent to me. There was a handwritten note folded inside. "Dad, you were my whole world when the world took Mom from us. Nobody else gets to touch what we built, not one person." Samantha passed on February 17, 2024, at 5:14 in the morning. I was holding her hand. I felt the moment the warmth left her fingers, and I swear something inside my chest collapsed that will never stand back up. The funeral was February 21st at Grace Covenant Church in Buckhead. Hundreds of people showed up. Business partners, suppliers, friends from college, neighbors. I was sitting in the front pew, barely holding myself together, when I felt a hand grip my shoulder. I turned around and saw a man I recognized but hadn't laid eyes on in over a decade. Tall, square jaw, graying at the temples now, wearing a charcoal suit with a pocket square. His eyes were wet. "Douglas," he said, "I'm so sorry about our Samantha." Our Samantha. That's what Victor Crane said to me, standing in the church where my daughter's casket sat 6 feet away. This was the man who had married my daughter in 2011, got her pregnant in 2013, then vanished in the middle of the night when she was 8 weeks along. Left a post-it note on the refrigerator that said, "I can't do this anymore." That was it. No phone call. No explanation. Just gone, and the stress of his abandonment, combined with everything else, caused Samantha to miscarry at 11 weeks. She almost didn't survive it, physically or emotionally. "What are you doing here, Victor?" I said, low enough that the people behind us wouldn't hear. "I came to pay my respects to the woman I loved." I wanted to break his jaw right there in the house of God. But I didn't. I turned back around and said nothing. Victor planted himself in the second row, directly behind me, and spent the entire service sobbing loud enough for everyone to hear. People who didn't know the real story leaned over to comfort him. One woman even handed him a tissue and whispered, "You poor man." He went up to the casket during the final viewing, placed both palms on the wood, and hung his head like he was in a movie. I watched him from the corner of my eye, and I can tell you there was something wrong with his grief. It was performed after the burial at Crestwood Memorial Gardens. While most of the guests headed to my sister's house for the reception, Victor waited for me by a black BMW parked under an oak tree at the edge of the cemetery lot. He had already loosened his tie. The tears were gone. In their place was a look I can only describe as hunger. "Douglas, we should talk. Just you and me. There's nothing on this earth you and I need to talk about. Actually, there is. It's about Samantha's estate." My stomach dropped. "I've done my research," he continued, lighting a cigarette. "Samantha and I were married, and my attorneys have found irregularities in how the divorce was processed back in 2013. Technically, there are provisions under Georgia law that could entitle me to a significant portion of her assets. You're out of your mind. The divorce was finalized. You signed off on everything. He smiled. Not a sad smile. A business smile. Finalized is a strong word, Douglas. Legal language is full of gray areas. Look, I'm not trying to make this ugly. I'm offering you a clean deal. You give me $13 million, and I walk away. No courtroom, no press, no public airing of the family's dirty laundry. I stared at this man, this coward who had abandoned my pregnant daughter, who had emptied their joint checking account of $9,000 on his way out, who had blocked her number and disappeared to God knows where, and I felt something inside me go completely still. Not rage. Something colder than rage. You have some nerve showing up at my daughter's funeral and trying to rob her grave. I'm offering you a courtesy, old man. Take the deal, or what comes next will be a whole lot worse. Get away from me. You've got until next Friday, he said, flicking his cigarette onto the cemetery grass. After that, my attorneys file the claim and the newspapers start calling. I watched his BMW pull away, and I made a promise to myself and to Samantha that I would destroy this man in court if it was the last thing I did. That night, I sat in Samantha's old bedroom at my house, the one she'd kept exactly the same since high school, with the purple curtains and the bulletin board full of concert tickets, and I called Nathan Pierce. Nathan had been our family attorney for 20 years. He knew Samantha's will inside and out because he'd helped her draft it. Douglas, that will is bulletproof, Nathan told me. Samantha made sure of it. She specifically instructed me to include language that would exclude any former spouse from any claim, and I have the finalized divorce decree from September 2013. Victor Crane waived all future rights to her assets. It's in writing, notarized, filed with the court. Then why is he so confident? Because he's bluffing. Or because he hired someone willing to exploit a technicality. Either way, we'll be ready. My next call was to Jolene Watts, who had been Samantha's executive assistant for the last 4 years. Jolene knew every detail of my daughter's professional and personal life. We met the next morning in a coffee shop near the Glow and Root headquarters in Midtown Atlanta. Jolene was 31, sharp as a tack, and fiercely loyal to Samantha. But that morning, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Mr. Morrow, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. Victor started contacting the office back in November. November? That's 3 months before she died. Yes, sir. He called the main line using different names. I recognized his voice the second time because Samantha had shown me photos and warned me about him years ago. When I told Samantha, she said to hang up immediately if he ever called again. Jolene told me that in December, Victor had shown up at the Atlanta flagship store in person, asking the staff about sales numbers, how many locations they had, whether Samantha had investors or partners. He'd been doing reconnaissance, mapping out exactly how much my daughter was worth. Did Samantha know about the in-person visit? Yes. That's when she had the office phone set to record every incoming call. And she installed cameras in her private office. I felt a chill go through me. My daughter had known. She'd sensed what was coming, and even while she was fighting for her life, she'd been quietly building a defense. Jolene handed me a USB drive. These are the recordings. Samantha told me that if Victor tried anything after her death, I should give these directly to you. I listened to those recordings alone in my living room that evening. Hearing my daughter's voice, thin from the chemo, but still steady, still unbroken, nearly destroyed me. But what those recordings contained was pure gold. In one call from January 23rd, Victor told Jolene directly, "Look, I know Samantha's not doing well. I just want to know if it's worth reconnecting. You understand what I mean? I'm not going to invest my time in someone who has nothing to show for it." In another from February 4th, "I've heard the business is worth tens of millions. If that's accurate, I think Samantha and I could put the past behind us. Everyone deserves a second chance, especially when there's real money involved." But the recording that made my blood freeze was from February 14th, 3 days before my daughter died. Victor had called asking specifically about the will. Has Samantha written a will? Because if there's any legal argument that we were still married under certain provisions, I'd have automatic rights to the estate. I'm just thinking ahead. He wasn't grieving. He was circling, waiting for her to die so he could swoop in. That same week, I learned through a contact of Nathan's, a financial consultant named Douglas Hewitt, no relation, that Victor was drowning in debt. He'd lost his marketing agency in 2021 after a series of failed cryptocurrency investments. He owed over $90,000 to various creditors and had been dodging collections for months. Samantha's inheritance was his lifeline. On March 4th, 2024, a process server knocked on my door and handed me a 62-page lawsuit. Victor was suing for $26 million plus damages, claiming he had contributed to the intellectual foundation of Glow and Root during their marriage, and that the divorce decree contained a procedural defect that rendered his waiver of rights unenforceable. His attorney was a man named Martin Delaney, known in Atlanta legal circles for aggressive tactics and tabloid leaks. Sure enough, 2 days later, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a piece titled "Skincare Mogul's Fortune at Stake. Ex-Husband Claims He Built the Brand." The article painted Victor as a heartbroken entrepreneur who had supported his wife's dream and was now being shut out by a vindictive father-in-law. There was a photo of Victor at the funeral, hand on the casket, captioned "A Husband's Goodbye." I wanted to scream. But Nathan told me to stay calm. Let them play their media game. When we get into that courtroom, we're going to play recordings that will make every person in that room despise him. While Nathan built our legal strategy, I went to Samantha's private office and opened the safe she had told me about. The combination was my birthday. Inside, I found everything, every email from their marriage, every text. The separation agreement, and most importantly, a letter Samantha had written for her divorce attorney in September 2013, notarized and witnessed, laying out the full history of Victor's abandonment. My husband, Victor Crane, left our home on the night of March 3, 2013, after learning I was pregnant, she had written. He emptied our joint account of $9,000, which represented my personal savings. He left no forwarding address. When I miscarried our child on April 18th due to severe stress, I attempted to reach him through every channel available. He had blocked my number, my email, and all social media. I request that the divorce decree permanently and irrevocably exclude Victor from any claim to my current or future assets. That letter was a weapon. Samantha had built it knowing someday she might need it. And she was right. Nathan also found another critical piece. During the marriage, Victor had signed a post-nuptial agreement in 2012, something he had apparently forgotten about, that explicitly stated each spouse's business ventures would remain separate property. Samantha had insisted on it because she was already sketching out her business plan for Glow and Root, and she didn't trust Victor even then. The first hearing was May 8th, 2024, at the Fulton County Superior Court. Nathan and I arrived early with 3 boxes of evidence. Victor walked in wearing a navy suit with a gold tie clip, flanked by Martin Delaney and 4 people I had never seen before. His expression was the picture of restrained dignity. The wronged husband, stoic and brave, Judge Claudette Ashford, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years on the bench, called the proceedings to order and gave Delaney the floor first. Delaney was slick. He painted a picture of Victor as the supportive husband who had nurtured Samantha's entrepreneurial spirit. He presented 4 witnesses. The first, a man named Irving Tate, who claimed to be a branding consultant, testified that he had worked with Victor in 2012 to develop the core concept of Glow and Root. The second was a woman named Diana Kendrick, who said she was an early investor Victor had personally recruited. The third and fourth were similarly positioned, people who claimed Victor had been instrumental in the company's genesis. I sat there grinding my teeth, but Nathan had told me to wait. When it was our turn, Nathan didn't open with legal arguments. He opened with Samantha's voice. "Your Honor, before we present our case, we'd like the court to hear recordings made by the deceased herself during the final months of her life." The first recording played. Samantha's voice, thin but clear, speaking to Victor during a meeting at her office in January 2024. "Victor, Why are you here after 11 years? Samantha, I know you're not well, and I know your business has done extremely well. I think we owe it to ourselves to find some kind of resolution. We resolved everything in 2013 when you disappeared. Look, let's be practical. You've built something worth north of $20 million. I was your husband during a critical period. My attorneys say I have standing to claim a portion. You have no standing, Victor. You signed away your rights. You abandoned me when I was carrying your child. Then, Victor's voice, dropping the charm, Samantha, you're a smart woman. You know that court battles can get messy, especially when the media gets involved. I'd hate for your father to deal with that kind of stress at his age. 5 million now, and I vanish forever. Get out of my office. Think about it. You might not have much time left to think. The courtroom was silent. Judge Ashford's pen stopped moving. She stared at Victor over the rim of her glasses. Nathan played the second recording. From February 10th, Victor had come back. This time, he was blunter. I've had my people look deeper into your financials. You're sitting on at least $25 million across properties, investments, and liquid assets. Your father is 66 years old. He doesn't need that kind of money. I'm 43. I've got my whole life ahead of me. You're delusional. I'm realistic. Here's what's going to happen. Either you give me $12 million now, or after you're gone, I tie up your estate in litigation for a decade. Your father will spend his golden years in courtrooms instead of enjoying what you left him. Victor, you are the most despicable person I have ever met. I'm a survivor, Samantha. Just like you. When the recordings ended, Delaney objected, claiming they were obtained without consent. Judge Ashford shut him down immediately. The recordings were made on the deceased's private property, in her own office. Overruled. Nathan then presented the notarized letter from 2013, the postnuptial agreement, and the finalized divorce decree. He laid out, piece by piece, the complete legal wall Samantha had built around her assets. Then he went after the witnesses. He asked Irving Tate to describe the branding work he'd supposedly done with Victor in 2012. Tate fumbled. He couldn't name the software they used. He couldn't describe the brand colors. He said the meetings took place at a Starbucks on Peachtree Street, but couldn't say which one. Can you produce a single invoice, contract, or email related to this alleged collaboration? Nathan asked. Those files were on a hard drive that crashed. Nathan turned to Diana Kendrick. Ms. Kendrick, you claim you invested in Glow and Root through Victor Crane in 2012. Can you tell the court the amount of your investment? It was around $50,000, I believe. And can you produce a receipt, a bank transfer, a canceled check? I paid in cash. $50,000 in cash to a man you barely knew, with no receipt. Kendrick stared at the floor. Nathan then presented evidence that my nephew Dennis, who works in cybersecurity, had uncovered. Irving Tate had been convicted of insurance fraud in 2020. Diana Kendrick was a part-time actress who had been paid to testify in at least 2 prior civil cases. The other 2 witnesses had similar histories. One had outstanding warrants in South Carolina, and the other had filed for bankruptcy 3 times. But the knockout punch came when Nathan showed the court bank transfers from Victor's account to each of the 4 witnesses in the 2 weeks before the hearing. Victor had paid them a combined $22,000 for their testimony. Judge Ashford looked at Victor with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life. It was the look of someone who has seen human depravity before, but is still capable of being disgusted by it. Mr. Crane, can you explain these payments? Victor stood up. His voice cracked. Those were personal loans. They had nothing to do with this case. Personal loans to 4 individuals who happened to testify in your favor. Within 2 weeks of the hearing, the judge's voice was flat, cold. She ordered the immediate arrest of all 4 witnesses on suspicion of perjury and scheduled a separate hearing for Victor on charges of witness tampering. Then she read her ruling on the inheritance case. The plaintiff's claim is denied in its entirety. The will of Samantha Morrow is valid and enforceable. Douglas Morrow is confirmed as the sole heir. The plaintiff is ordered to pay all legal costs and a $75,000 fine for abusive process. I sat there in that courtroom and cried for the first time since Samantha's funeral. not from sadness, but from relief, and from pride. Pride in my daughter, who had seen this coming and had given me everything I needed to fight it. But it wasn't over. 2 weeks after the verdict, Jolene called me with something that had been bothering her since she went through the final batch of Samantha's files. "Mr. Morrow, I found hospital visitor logs that don't make sense." She had contacted a friend who worked at Emory University Hospital, and that friend had pulled the records. According to the logs, Victor had visited Samantha 3 times during her final weeks, February 7th, February 12th, and February 15th, always during the overnight shift, when I wasn't there. He had presented forged documents identifying himself as her legal husband. "That's impossible," I said. Samantha told the nurses not to let anyone in except me and her friend Kathleen. That's what I thought. But he had fake paperwork. A marriage certificate that looked official. The night staff didn't catch it. Jolene then told me what her friend had observed after Victor's last visit on February 15th. Samantha had been extremely agitated. Her blood pressure had spiked. She'd grabbed the nurse's wrist and said, "Don't let that man back in. Don't let him make me sign anything." Those words hit me like a freight train. Victor had gone to my dying daughter's hospital room and tried to force her to change her will. I called Nathan immediately. He contacted the district attorney's office, and within 48 hours, prosecutors had pulled the hospital's security footage. It showed Victor entering the room at 11:47 p.m. on February 15th with a leather briefcase and leaving at 1:30 a.m., carrying a folder he did not have when he entered. When investigators searched Victor's apartment, they found that folder. Inside was a forged version of Samantha's will with handwritten modifications naming Victor as a beneficiary of 45% of the estate. There was also a set of power of attorney documents that would have given Victor control over Samantha's assets if she had become incapacitated. The prosecutor, a man named Thomas Ingram, laid it out for me in his office. "Mr. Morrow, your daughter refused to sign. According to the nurse's notes and the security footage, she physically pushed him away and threatened to call the police. He left with the unsigned documents, but the fact that he brought them, that he entered the hospital under false pretenses, that he pressured a dying woman, that's coercion, forgery, fraud, and criminal trespass. Is that why she deteriorated so fast in those last 2 days?" I asked. Ingram paused. "We can't prove causation, but the medical records show a significant decline in her condition after that visit. Her oncologist noted it was unexpected, given her treatment trajectory." I went home that night and sat in the dark for a long time. All those months, I had thought Victor was just a greedy ex-husband who had showed up at the funeral to grab some money. Now, I knew he was something far worse. He had hunted my daughter while she was dying. He had stood over her hospital bed at midnight and tried to steal her legacy while the machines beeped beside her. And she had fought him off. Barely able to breathe, barely able to move, my Samantha had fought him off. In her last letter to me, dated February 16th, one day before she died, she had written a line that now took on new meaning. "Dad, make sure my will stands. Don't let anyone twist what we built together. I've made sure you'll have everything you need." She had known. She had known exactly what Victor was doing, and she had used her last reserves of strength to protect me. The criminal investigation expanded rapidly. Thomas Ingram discovered that Victor wasn't just a failed husband who'd gotten greedy. He was a serial predator. Over the next 6 weeks, 5 additional victims came forward. The first was Claudia Navarro, a 48-year-old widow from Savannah who had dated Victor in 2019. He had talked her into investing $60,000 in a fake consulting firm, then vanished when she asked for returns. The second was Murray Stackhouse, a 61-year-old retiree who had met Victor at a poker game in 2020. Victor convinced him to invest $95,000 in a shell company called Crane Capital Ventures. The company existed only on paper. 3 more victims surfaced with similar stories. Victor's method was always the same. Find someone vulnerable, widows, divorces, retirees, people in medical crisis, gain their trust, drain their resources, then threaten them into silence. In total, investigators documented losses of over $520,000 across 8 victims spanning 7 years. Victor had kept detailed files on all of them: photographs, financial records, personal vulnerabilities, stored on an encrypted laptop in his apartment. This wasn't desperation. This was a business model. On August 12, 2024, Victor Crane stood trial at the Fulton County Criminal Court. He arrived in handcuffs, a different man from the one who had strutted into Samantha's funeral 5 months earlier. His hair was uncombed. His suit was wrinkled. The arrogance was gone. The trial lasted 3 days. Prosecutor Ingram presented every recording, every document, every piece of security footage. He brought the victims to the stand, one by one. Claudia Navarro testified with tears in her eyes about how Victor had stolen her late husband's life insurance money. Murray Stackhouse described how he'd lost his retirement savings and had been too ashamed to tell his children. But the testimony that silenced the courtroom came from Yolanda Briggs, the night nurse who had been on duty during Victor's last hospital visit. She described finding Samantha in a state of extreme distress, trembling, clutching her blankets, repeating, "He tried to make me sign. Don't let him come back. Please." When I was allowed to give my impact statement, I stood at that podium and looked directly at Victor. "You didn't just try to steal money," I said. "You invaded my daughter's last days on earth. You stood over her while she was dying and tried to take from her the one thing she had left to give, her love for me, expressed through her will. You treated her death like a business opportunity. You treated her illness like a countdown clock. And when she refused you, even from her deathbed, you came to her funeral and pretended to grieve so you could rob me instead." I paused. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. "My daughter was braver than you will ever be. She fought cancer for 5 months, and she fought you at the same time. And she won both battles." The judge deliberated for 4 hours. When he returned, the verdict was guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, coercion, criminal trespass, witness tampering, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. The sentence: 27 years in federal prison with no possibility of early parole. Full restitution to all victims. Victor collapsed. His attorney asked for a recess. The judge denied it. Walking out of the courthouse that afternoon, I was met by Claudia, Murray, and the other victims. Claudia took my hand and said, "Mr. Morrow, if you hadn't fought for your daughter, that man would still be out there destroying lives. You didn't just protect Samantha's legacy, you protected all of us." In the months that followed, I spent a lot of time sitting in Samantha's old office, reading through her journals. In one entry from 2023, before she was even diagnosed, she had written, "If I ever make enough money to really change things, I want to help women who got knocked down the way I did, women who lost everything to someone they trusted and had to start from zero." That's when I knew what to do with the $26 million. On January 20th, 2025, I officially launched the Samantha Morrow Foundation for Women Rebuilding Their Lives. The mission was simple: provide interest-free startup loans, free legal support, and mentorship to women who had been financially devastated by abusive or abandoning partners and wanted to build businesses of their own. I put $16 million into the endowment and kept $10 million for my family's security and living expenses. Jolene agreed to serve as the foundation's executive director. She had been Samantha's right hand, and there was no one better to carry this forward. We set up headquarters in the same Midtown building where Glow and Root had started. On opening day, Samantha's best friend from college, Kathleen, gave a speech that had everyone in tears. "Samantha turned heartbreak into $1 billion skincare line," Kathleen said. "She turned betrayal into independence. And now, even after she's gone, she's turning her story into a lifeline for women she'll never meet. That is legacy." Within the first 6 months, the foundation received over 400 applications. We funded 87 new businesses, bakeries, salons, tutoring centers, cleaning services, online boutiques, daycare programs, each one started by a woman who had been left behind and decided to keep going. In September 2025, I received a letter from the Foundation's very first grant recipient, a 32-year-old mother of 3 named Isabel Cortez. Her ex-husband had cleaned out their savings and disappeared to another state. With the Foundation's help, she had opened a catering business in Decatur. Mr. Morrow, she wrote, 6 months ago I was sleeping on my sister's couch with 3 kids and $11 in my checking account. Today, I employ 4 people, and I just signed a contract to cater events for a hotel chain. Your daughter saved my life, and she never even knew my name. Every meal I prepare carries a piece of her spirit. I read that letter sitting in Samantha's old bedroom under the purple curtains, and I cried harder than I had since the day she died. But these were different tears. These were the kind that wash you clean. By the end of 2025, the foundation had helped 214 women start businesses, creating more than 900 jobs nationwide. Claudia Navarro, one of Victor's former victims, had joined the foundation as a volunteer counselor, helping other women navigate the legal aftermath of financial abuse. Murray Stackhouse had donated his time as a financial literacy instructor. Victor's appeal was denied unanimously. He would spend the next 27 years behind bars. When he gets out, he'll be 70 years old with nothing and no one. But honestly, I stopped thinking about Victor a long time ago. He doesn't matter. What matters is what Samantha built, and what her legacy continues to build every single day. Last Christmas, I hosted a dinner at my house for the foundation's staff, its first 50 grant recipients, and the people who had stood beside me through the worst year of my life. Nathan, Jolene, Kathleen, the investigators, the prosecutors, the victims who became volunteers. 43 people sat around tables that stretched from my dining room through the living room and into the kitchen. I stood up and read the last paragraph of the last letter Samantha ever wrote to me. Dad, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. But please don't let the sadness stop you. Take what I've left and turn it into something beautiful. Something that would make Mom proud. Something that proves love is stronger than greed, and that the people who build with their hands will always outlast the people who steal with theirs. I looked up from that letter at 43 faces. Women who had lost everything and found their way back. People who had been victimized and chose to help others. Friends who had shown up when it counted. And I knew, as clearly as I've ever known anything, that Samantha was right. Victor Crane had believed he could take my daughter's legacy through lies and intimidation. What he never understood was that Samantha's real legacy was never the $26 million. It was her stubborn, beautiful refusal to let the worst people in her life define her story. It was the recordings she made while dying, the safe she filled with evidence, the letters she wrote with hands that could barely hold a pen, the foundation that now carries her name into the lives of women she'll never meet, but who will carry her forward forever. If you like this story, hit the like button, subscribe to Stories of Lauren, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thanks for watching.